Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some really good news coming out of the Bronx in New York. You remember we were talking about the Hunts Point produce market strike where the workers were going on strike because, hey, they wanted a raise. How dare they? But the company offered them, I think something like 30 cents, like 32 cents an hour. They wanted $1. And they said, look, we worked through this pandemic. We're the ones who risked our lives to keep the community fed and the corporate profits rolling. We want a part of it. And they went out on strike, and it was a big deal. You had AOC show up. You had like 100 cops swarm them. It was a big deal. Well, they just held the vote. They ratified a new contract, $1.85 over 3 years, and the big part, they don't have to pay a dime out of pocket for their health care costs. This is a big deal. And this is the stuff I hope we see much, much more of people coming together and saying we demand better. That idea of union job, better life, absolutely. And here to share some thoughts on how we take that to our transit heroes, the people who showed up every single day to get people to work, the nurses, these food workers to their jobs during the heart of the pandemic. And I don't think got enough credit for it. That's why I've asked Kenneth Kirk to come talk with us. Kenneth is the International Secretary-Treasurer of the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU. Kenneth, thanks for taking time for us.
I didn't hear you.
Thanks for taking some time for us.
Yeah, I'm glad to. And President Costa sends his regards.
It's great to hear. So we're in this moment where as I said, we're in a moment where you had. All during the pandemic, we're saying, oh, they're heroes, they're essential workers, we care, but we didn't really pay them. And what really mattered, we didn't really honor them because their working conditions didn't get all that much better. And we really kind of took it for granted. And now we don't even talk about that anymore. I think that's a shame.
I do too. We still have a lot of members out there that's passing away, and we got a lot of people that's getting sick. And we can't even get a hazard pay or any type of protection from, COVID that we should be getting.
Yeah, I remember stories of your locals all across New York and New Jersey going out and going to the Home Depot or wherever they could get PPE for their members, going out and just getting that stuff where the transit authorities weren't, our government wasn't, and just kind of leaving them out in the cold. And some of the horror stories that I've heard, shameful. I mean, I go back to that word, shameful.
Yeah, they're shameful, and the big challenge today is the vaccine and getting everybody vaccinated, and dealing with that whole issue of who wants it and who don't want it, and so we're still out here trying to serve the public and keep transit moving despite all of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you don't want to get the vaccine, move aside. Let those of us who do get it, let's move forward. Let's get past this. Let's get life somewhere back to normal. But here's the thing: it's going to be a transition. It's going to be hard work, and it's going to take some actual planning. Which is why I'm glad to see that you guys are part of this organization that's having a community hearing to talk about public transit. You're calling it a national conversation, saying that the economy will not run without transit. And I think we learned that during the pandemic. Had the trains not run, had the buses not run, people wouldn't have gotten to work and would have been much, much worse off. Tell me about what you're doing during this community hearing, this national conversation event.
Yeah, so on February the 3rd and February the 4th, we're going to have a national conference where we're going to have different advocacy groups, whether they be bus passengers and climate, green people to come in. And we're going to do a 2-day workshop, which I will serve as on the panel on the very first day in the opening session. Also, during the transit day, we're going to have other locals out leafleting and doing different things. In the past, we've even had free ride days, et cetera. And just so everybody knows, this all started by our past president, Larry Hanley, who left us unfortunately. He wanted to dedicate a day to Rosa Parks on her birthday, February the 4th. as we all know, she took the big step of making transit a civil rights issue. And, we know transit is something that it's a civil rights issue. Everybody should have a right to public transit, just like we should have a right to medical care. So we're going to have this 2-day online testimony from workers and riders and critical public transit. And we just invited everybody to participate. It's open to the public, and to share a few things with you. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but if anyone wanted the agenda, they can go to laborforsustainability.org. The whole agenda is on there for your review and with information about it. And we'll be glad to see you there, and maybe we'll get to talk in more detail.
Right. Now, we'll make sure that we get the link out for folks through our social media that they can go right to it and sign up. Because, look, I think educating people about how important public transit is really, really important. When I lived in Cleveland, there was a pretty good transit system. The RTA was a pretty good system. It wasn't enough. I always thought we should have had much more opportunity to use it, but it was still a reasonably good system. I always wondered what would have happened if the buses ran every 15 minutes instead of every 45. The trains ran every 10 minutes instead of every 30. Would people then use it more? Because I think the future for us in this country is moving to more public transit, more ability to get around without having to drive cars and upkeep roads and all of that stuff. So I think it's a conversation, especially as we're talking about moving to a greener economy, that absolutely has to be had.
Yes, in fact, we're going to be talking about that and having a green economy. As you well know, President Biden has said that he's going to make that a big part of things going forward, to create new jobs, green jobs, electrical buses, gas buses, natural gas buses, and those types of things to try to make, because as we know, you can get 40 people on a bus, but you got one person in the car. Transportation is the way for us to improve the environment and the climate as well.
Yeah, I always say, whether you're going to use public transit or not, that's going to get all those people in front of you off the road, so you'll be able to get to work faster. If you can get, like you said, if you can get 39 more people off the road, you may have a better shot at getting to work on time. And because the reality is our infrastructure was built for traffic, 20 years ago. We keep growing exponentially, and we're not growing our roads. You're not seeing them double. You're not seeing the availability of more transit happening. In fact, you see it because of costs and lack of investment. You see it shrinking. The fact that I live near Harrisburg, the state capital of Pennsylvania, and I can't get to our nation's capital unless I go all the way over to Philadelphia and then come all the way back is insane to me. There should be a direct line from Harrisburg, the state capital of this state, to our nation's capital, and it should be 20 minutes, 30 minutes at most.
Yes, sir.
So how do we get to that place, Kenneth? How do we get to a place? How do we excite people around the idea of, what, we got to do things smarter. Let's leave some infrastructure for our children and our grandchildren where they're going to look back like we do to Eisenhower going, what? He built the interstate highway system. Nice job. How about we build something like that scale with public transit?
Well, we've got to convince people to put investment, particularly citizens and the government. We can have those 15-minute buses that you want if we had more public money into transit, and if we had people that was more interested in riding, where we could create more funds so we could become more dependable by raising more funds. So it's kind of a difficult thing. I know we in some places we work really hard at that. In some places we don't work really hard at it. Like New York, they work really hard at that. But like in Dallas, Texas, where I'm from, people love cars and they don't get it.
I love my car too, but you know what? I don't want to be sitting in traffic in it all day long either. And the sad reality is, look, I used to, when I lived in Cleveland, like I said, I used to take the Rapid into downtown, and it was always crowded. I mean, you were literally like a sardine. If we were running more of them, if we had more capacity, you could make it more comfortable. You could make it less sardine-like during rush hours. and more comfortable. And I think people would then get used to having a little bit more space and being able to use those in a way that fit their lives. This idea that I can get downtown by 5 o'clock, and after 6, maybe you get home or maybe you don't, is insane to me. We need massive investments, and I have the way we can do it. We stop giving the oil companies the massive subsidies we've been giving them the last 100 years, and we use that to invest in the future. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I think that would be a great idea, but we also got to deal with the car dealers and the people who build all this concrete to make them understand that we're eventually going to run out of space. Therefore, we're going to need public transit so we can carry people in large volumes. And it's much faster, it's environmental friendly, and it helps our climate and our environment. Just a matter of convincing the right people and making public transit more available for people to use.
Right. Does it have to be a Hunger Games? I mean, because what you've basically laid out is a Hunger Games scenario where if we do invest in public transit, well, we can't build roads. I still think we're going to need the roads and bridges. I don't see those going away. I just see the capacity being overtaxed and us being just gridlocked at some point, to where if you're not creating new capacity for new people to move around, we're just going to end up eventually everything stops.
Yeah, my point was is we're building too many roads, and we should put more money into public transit as opposed to just steady building roads. As you can see, in some places, those roads are empty, but because they got so much concrete out there. But I hear you. I don't have the answer at this time, but I'm working toward it.
Yeah, how much, again, we're in this weird kind of moment in our society where, we're kind of pitted against each other. It's male against female, black against white. We're in this weird world. How much do you think the negatives of transit have to do with stereotypes of people who use transit? Because I'll tell you, when I lived in Cleveland, I used it all the time. But I'm curious of your thought on that.
Yeah, well, we know for a fact that that's one of the challenges we have, is that most people who have more money don't like to use transit, and they try to categorize it as a way for the poor, and only the poor people ride. And, some people just doesn't take advantage of all the things that we can offer in transit, and they maybe only use it to go back and forth to work, but they could use it for many things, like going to a crowded central business districts. If you could use transit, you wouldn't have to worry about parking. You wouldn't have all these crowded streets and bumper to bumper traffic. So I think just trying to convince people, there's lots of things that over the years transit has tried to do, like offer bus passes to these different companies and subsidize some companies through working to try to encourage people to ride the bus more and to ride the trains more. So I think that if we can figure out a way to convince people that transit is for everyone, and maybe we can appeal to their environmental concerns and concerns for the climate.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on giving free, or just having public transit free? That we just, as a matter of funding the commons like we do on the roads. The roads are mostly free. We've got some that have cash boxes on it, but you can drive on most roads free. What do you think of the argument? Hey, just let people ride public transit for free.
That would be a great idea, to let people ride public transit for free, but then we would have to convince the people to pay for it. And pretty much public transit is, in a way, free, because the amount of fares that people pay don't usually cover the full fare.
Right.
So we could just improve it just a little bit. I think if more people rode, then they would appreciate it. You don't pay directly for the police or the fire department, so why pay for the public transit? That's my argument.
I'm right there with you. Now I'm not entirely for the idea of free public transit, because people who can afford it would get it for free and they would pay for it anyway, like I used to going downtown, because I took the Rapid down because it was cheaper than paying parking. It just worked out really well, and I think we have to make some of those arguments. So let me ask you, last line of questioning I want to get into is, how do we get people turned around on this? I know people who have never ridden a bus. I mean, it's completely out of my ability to fathom how you could never have ridden a bus. But there are some people who have never done it. How do you get those people to go, yeah, this is a good idea. We should be expanding it?
Well, I think it goes back to your first comments. We have to make the service more efficient and more readily available. I think once people can understand that they can get from one point to another just as fast on transit as they can in cars, because that's the biggest argument that you hear, that it takes longer. But if we could just make it more frequent and more consistent, then I think we would get more people to ride. And that's pretty much all I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, and look, every time we go into New York or we go to Chicago or we go someplace where they have a good functional, or even Cleveland, when I go back home to visit, I make sure that the kids ride the public transit and that you learn how to use it and you learn how to get around, because it's important, because I do think it is the future. I do think that we have to move to this, and I think we got to train the next generation to go, yeah, we want this and we're going to fight for it and we're going to make sure that it's accessible. Because this is, for me, the idea, maybe not for my generation, but for my kids, they're going to be the ones I hope that push this.
Well, younger kids have taken to transit more, because if you notice that the trend is a lot of younger kids don't even have driver's license. They like taking Uber, but we want them on public transit and not necessarily Uber. But there's a lot of, that's why you see these bicycles at these racks and these scooters. There's a lot of people that's getting away from getting driver's license and even purchasing cars, because sometimes their economy of scales doesn't allow them to. So I see with the younger people that they're more enthusiastic about transit than the older people. We got to figure out a way to get the older people on the buses.
Yeah, just leave them. Leave them. The future is the younger generation. Leave those old fogies behind. Let them walk. That's pretty horrible, isn't it? But
yeah,
Kenneth, I appreciate your time, man. I wish you the best on Wednesday and Thursday, February 3rd and 4th. The conference, I believe, starts at 3 p.m. on Wednesday. The Transit Equity Network. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at it, sign up, and be part of that. Any final thoughts?
Well, my only final thought is I'd just like to thank you for having me on. And this is my first time on one of these shows. As you can see, I'm a little uptight, but tell folks I usually think a lot quicker and a lot faster, but Rick had me nervous. Thank you, Rick, for letting me come, and the ATU appreciate you letting everybody know about our Transit Equity Day. We hope that everybody will join in and be with us for those 2 days, or any parts of either one of the days that you can be. Just remember that transit is a civil right, and everybody should have a right to public transit. And thank you very much.
Good stuff, Kenneth. I appreciate it. Thanks so much, man. Kenneth, no, I mean, we need to really be pushing this in a really big way, in my view. But Kenneth Kirk, Secretary Treasurer there of ATU, the Amalgamated Transit Union. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.